So, Dr. Sandler,
Sir.
you can cure depression and anxiety.
Yeah. That discussion, if you like, and when you publish on a couple examples. I just gave a little talk about what but I'm also a counselor. So welcome back to Psychobabble. Last time we saw another little clip, a short clip of Carla, a case from my book, Tea with Freud. We've seen Carla begin to tell us the story of her childhood background, full of trauma, full of alcoholism, domestic violence, and child abuse of her brother, only her brother. And we see that as she tells the story, she's not really getting in touch with the feelings. She has a number of defense mechanisms to block the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Laughter,
Yes.
denial, isolation of affect. We still don't know quite what's under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And now we're going to take a look.
Now we're going to take a look. Let's put it on, Carla.
It sounds pretty awful.
It was. Yeah, we were scared all the time.
Scared all the time.
Yeah.
What was the worst of it? I mean, is there a specific memory you can share with me so I could really get a picture of it?
I do remember one night in particular.
Mm-hmm.
My dad had been drinking a lot, and they were fighting,
Yeah.
and my mom was threatening to leave. She was gonna leave and
Oh.
take us with her. And he was really drunk, and he put himself in front of the door. We were kind of barricading it, and wouldn't let her go. And he was saying some horrendous things about what he would do to her if she tried to leave.
He was threatening her.
Yeah. At one point my mom said, okay, never mind. She went upstairs and kind of thought it was over. My dad went
Mm-hmm.
back into the kitchen to get more beer.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently my mom had actually called the police. The police showed up at the door a little while later, and she kind of quickly and quietly went to the door and let them in. And we followed her and the cops back to the kitchen where my dad was.
Mm-hmm.
And the cops were trying to talk to him, and he picked up a butcher knife
He did.
and was kind of behaving threateningly towards the police. And I just remember watching them throw him down on the ground and handcuff him, and I mean, they pulled a gun on him and they had him at gunpoint.
Oh, wow. What's it like to remember this? You got
It's-
some feelings coming up, huh?
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, sad indeed.
It's really sad.
Terrible story.
I guess I just think if I were a parent, I would never expose my kids to that.
No, of course not. All that stuff you and your brother and sister saw is terrible for kids.
Yeah, I mean, we would hide upstairs in our room, my brother and my sister and I, and we would box our ears so we couldn't hear them hitting each other in
Oh, wow.
the chairs and stuff. And
How scary for kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
she was just angry. She was really angry.
Your mom?
Yeah, and she just, she'd throw beer bottles at him.
Really?
She would sort of hold it all in and bottle it all up, and then throw beer bottles at him. And I kind of feel like that's what I do with Jimmy. I just don't throw bottles.
What do you do with Jimmy?
I say terrible things.
So you bottle it up just like your mother, and you lash out just as she did, but you do it with words. That's quite a connection you're making. You ever think about that before? You ever realized that before? In some way that you're copying your mother's behavior?
I had no. I don't really talk about this stuff. So.
Yeah. You don't really talk about this stuff. So what's it like to talk about it with me today?
It's hard.
Yeah, I'll bet it is.
I've just never done therapy. It just feels like opening up a lot of stuff.
It's all been packed away in there, huh?
Yeah.
All boxed up.
All boxed up. Yeah.
As we look at it, it seems like you begin to have some sadness and some compassion for what you and your brother and sister went through.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. It was awful.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Maybe better to feel the sadness rather than tell yourself, well, it feels like it never happened and it's a long time ago. And maybe better to let some of this out and feel some compassion for yourself and Anthony and your sister. Maybe change the way you treat Jenny.
Maybe.
You can let some of these feelings out and put them where they belong instead of stay all tense and anxious and periodically lash out with the anger at him without knowing where the anger comes from. Huh?
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
No, I wouldn't
I
think
really
so.
don't.
I hope not.
So we did get somewhere in this tape, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were looking for the feeling. So I think that now you'll be
Yeah.
kind of okay that we are getting to some of it.
Right. And we got there when I asked her for a specific example, a specific story.
Yeah.
People can talk about all kinds of trouble and keep the emotion bottled up. But if you ask for a specific story, especially
Mhm.
after pointing out the defenses for a while,
Mhm.
it's harder to keep the emotions at bay.
Mhm.
So she tells us this horrible story
Mhm.
of her father, the police coming in,
Mhm.
his mother calls the police, and they have him on the floor at gunpoint. And
Mhm.
very terrifying for a little girl who,
Yeah.
despite everything, of course, loved her father.
Mhm.
And that's when the affect emerges, the emotion.
So now you see that she is there and she is talking about memories, painful memories,
Mhm.
memories that can explain symptoms.
Right.
But you don't want to stop there. You want the affect, and the way to do that is,
Right.
okay, now let's talk about a specific memory.
Right.
And
And notice what she says the minute she gets in touch with the feeling. She says, I would never treat a child like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Which is
Mhm.
interesting
Mhm.
because, it's interesting because I saw her a couple of years later. She had married this fellow and had a
Mhm.
child. And I thought, the first thing she feels is some compassion for herself and her unborn child, and says children shouldn't be treated like that.
Mhm.
Which is different than the way she grew up,
Mhm.
which is just, well, that's the way life is.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think part of the benefit of getting in touch with feelings, people say, well, why should you do that?
Yeah.
Is because it allows you to have some compassion for yourself and what you went through,
Mhm.
and have some compassion for other people as well.
You say that you saw her 2 years later. I thought she was an actress.
I'm talking about the real Carla.
So there was a real Carla.
Oh, yes.
So there was a real Carla, and
Oh,
you
yes.
wrote about that in the book,
Right.
and then had this actress play. So there,
Yes,
yeah,
Aaron
so there
Warren.
was a real person. This is a real patient actually.
This is a real case?
But you couldn't get the real patient because of privacy reasons,
Right.
so you got an actress. So this is
Exactly.
not like all fiction.
No.
This is a real
No,
story.
in fact,
this is a real case.
Yes,
Mhm.
and the real Carla agreed to be videotaped so that in the book I put word for word what she said and what I
Mhm.
said, and then I contacted this actress, Erin Waterhouse, and said, would you please play this part?
Well, that makes it more interesting.
Yeah, it's a true case.
I actually like movies when they say that it's based on a true story. Then it's, hey, yeah,
Right.
this is just not all imagination. This is something that really happened.
Yeah,
And this is really something that happened.
yeah,
So this is really how you work.
right,
It's not all made up.
right.
But yeah,
Pretty much word for word.
yeah. So when she has this, she cries and has this compassion. You ask her, how does it feel talking about it?
Mhm.
Was it just a a reassuring thing, or there was something more purpose to that?
No, there is a purpose. I want to know if she's comfortable with this mode of therapy.
Mhm.
Because as you know, many therapies, probably most therapies, do not focus on an immediate experience of the
Mhm.
emotion.
Mhm.
And this is so intense and there's so much trauma. So I'm really asking her, are you okay with this? Is it too much? Does it feel like the wrong thing to do? And
Mhm.
she's comfortable with it. And
Mhm.
she has a sense, as many people do, that this has been sitting here for years. I want to get it out.
Mhm. Yeah. So I want to remind you something, Dr. Sandler, that you taught me and you forgot that. You told me, when you were teaching me about this method, is that when the affect is there, when the patient expresses the affect, then you always check in. And it's not only just to check in if the patient is comfortable, you check in for yourself whether your technique was right. Yeah. Because if it was not a healthy thing that you did, the patient won't feel that sigh of relief that she said, that it was good to shed it off and talk to someone in therapy.
Yeah.
She will feel, I'm uncomfortable. And if she says that, you mean that you went somewhere wrong.
Well, it's a risk in any therapy, of course, that you do something not quite right and upset a person. And in this treatment, you can push too hard to get through the defenses and push too fast, especially with somebody with this much trauma. And the patient might feel like this is just overwhelming. And then I know that I've had a so-called technical error. I've been pushing too hard, too fast.
Too hard. Or sometimes also, like you used to say, that the sadness in itself is being used as a defense.
Well, that could be.
So it's very complicated stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Not everyone can do that.
Right.
You have to be a professional to do that. Sure. Don't try that at your home.
Don't try this at home. Right.
All right.
There's another thing that came up that I want to point out, though. After the breakthrough of affect, she says it was so terrible. My mother used to throw bottles at my father.
Yeah, I imagine.
And then immediately she says, and I do the same thing with my boyfriend, but I don't throw bottles. I do it verbally. So before I can even make such a wonderful interpretation, she does it and says, I'm acting like my mother. I have made an identification with my mother, and this is what I'm acting out in my relationship.
Yeah.
And after the first few sessions, she stopped doing that to her boyfriend. She stopped criticizing him and mocking him. And she stopped herself in the middle of it once and said to him, I'm so sorry, this is not about you. It's about my dad, and I'm working it out in therapy. I suspect he dropped his jaw when he heard that. He was kind of used to being berated.
Right, yeah. So she's what in dynamic some people might call it, she was internalizing you. So she saw your process, and now she'd already started doing it herself. Right?
Yeah. She's starting to think this through.
Yeah.
And come upon a realization she did not have when she had denial in place and a nervous laugh and she wasn't in touch with the feelings.
Yeah. So, and that's an important part of the therapy, is that when the patient starts doing those processes themselves, learning it, after working with a professional. I had a good patient in therapy, a different kind of a therapy, but we used to say that, when I am in trouble, like at home, I have a mini session with you.
Yeah.
So he knows what I will say, and he's learned it, and so that's a part of the healing process.
That's when therapy is going well. Of course, when the patient doesn't just shut it down as he or she leaves the office, but the process keeps going during the week internally.
Yeah. I think we're going off on a tangent. So, we'll watch more of Carla next time, right?
Yep. Well, this is the last of the 4 tapes.
This is the last of the 4 tapes.
Right.
So next time, more of psychodynamic psychotherapy.
Right. Exactly.
In general. Just keep watching suspense. What are we going to talk about next time?